So I read this Steve Jobs quote recently that really challenged me. And he's talking about innovation. And he says, people often think innovation is saying yes to the things you've got to focus on. But he said it's not really that at all. It's actually more about saying no to the hundreds of other good things that are in front of you, so that you can say yes to the truly important, the truly phenomenal. And I think that's such a struggle for us in this day and age, right? Because we want to say yes to so many things. We want to be a part of everything. But I think there's this skill that God is calling us into, this self-discipline of being able to say no to the mediocre and even the good, so that we can say yes to the truly great. And I want to talk about a story in scriptures that comes from the Gospel of Luke that illustrates this. It's sort of this scandalous narrative that Jesus lives out, and I want to unpack that today. It's a story that maybe a lot of us have heard before and missed some of the meaning there. It's the story of two sisters, Mary and Martha. And they're friends of Jesus, and they invite Jesus and his followers over for a meal. And while they're there, Jesus is teaching the followers and his disciples, and one of the sisters, Mary, is sitting there at the feet of Jesus listening. And the other sister, Martha, she's busy in the kitchen, cooking and cleaning and serving and being really a phenomenal host. And Martha gets frustrated at her sister Mary, who's listening to Jesus, and she comes to Jesus and says, listen, my sister's just sitting there, not helping me. Tell her to come help me. And Jesus gently rebukes her. He says, Martha, Martha, you're worried and upset about so many things. There's really only one thing that's important, and Mary has chosen that, and that will not be taken from her. And I think a lot of times when we hear this story, we assume that Jesus is reprimanding Martha for being busy and for just working too hard. And Mary is just kind of taking it easy and learning to relax, which is so important. And that's a good truth that we should pull from the story. But if you unpack the historical context a little bit more, you see a deeper meaning there and really a scandalous truth that exists. And to understand that, we need to know two things. First is this idea that phrase where it says Mary was sitting at the feet of Jesus. That was a common Hebrew phrase that everybody at the time knew was reserved only for someone who was called a disciple. If you were sitting at the feet of a rabbi, of a teacher or a master, you were a disciple. That was a place and a position of honor and respect. Not everyone could be a disciple. And women were not allowed to be disciples. Secondly, in this culture, in the first century AD, women were not even really supposed to be in the same room as a teacher or a rabbi. So the fact that Mary is in the room, sitting at the feet of Jesus, in the place of a disciple, that is a scandalous thing. And really, Martha is frustrated by that fact. She's worried what society and culture will think of her sister. She's frustrated that she's over here and Mary's over here. And she says, Jesus, tell Mary to come help me. Tell her to fall in line. Tell her to know her place. And that's what Jesus reprimands. It says, Martha, you're worried and upset about many things. See, he doesn't tell her that she's working too hard or being too busy. He says, you're worried about too many things. But Mary has chosen what is best, and that will not be taken from her. What Martha's doing in the kitchen and being a host is not bad. It's great. She's being a good host. But Mary has chosen what is better. Jesus says, I will not take that from her. She has broken all the rules. She's in a place that she shouldn't be. She's sitting in a man's spot, listening to a rabbi, in the place of a disciple. And God says she's chosen what's best. I love how this story beautifully illustrates that concept of being able to say no to things in your life so you can say yes to the very best. We see Mary not letting others' opinions or the fabricated boundaries that culture has created for her dictate her life. She recklessly pursues Jesus and says, I will make him my primary goal, and I will say no to things that will keep me from that. So in our own lives, I pray that we have the courage and the wisdom to be able to say no to the good so we can say yes to the very best. Because God is calling us into lives full of meaning and purpose, and he wants to do phenomenal things in us and through us. And that only happens when we create boundaries and we can say no to the good and yes to the very best.